Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a side of American history that you probably didn't learn in school. We're talking about a hidden connection, a kind of secret blueprint that helped shape the very foundation of the United States.
So, think about it for a second. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Paul Revere. These guys are absolute legends of the American Revolution. We know them as generals, statesmen, and patriots. But what if I told you there was something else that connected them? Something they shared in private. A bond forged in a secret society that influenced everything they did. That's right. Away from the battlefields, away from the public eye, these towering figures of history were all brothers. They belonged to the same powerful and, pretty influential fraternity. And believe me, this was way more than just some social club. It was a network, a brotherhood, built on a shared vision for what a new world could look like.
And that brotherhood was Freemasonry. Now, back in the 18th century, Freemasonry was huge. It was this massive social and philosophical movement that was sweeping across Europe and the American colonies. It was a place where these radical new ideas, things like liberty, equality for all men, brotherhood, were not just whispered but celebrated. It was, you could say, the perfect incubator for a revolution.
Okay, so let's get into the who's who of it all. Who exactly were these Masonic patriots? Let's dive in and meet some of the key players of the American Revolution and see just how deep their connection to this fraternity really went.
And you really have to start with a man himself, George Washington. For him, being a Mason wasn't some casual thing he did on the weekends. No, this was a deep, personal, lifelong commitment that started way before the first shots of the Revolution were fired and stayed with him all the way through his presidency.
His Masonic journey actually started when he was just a young man in the Fredericksburg Lodge in Virginia. And you can see how the Masonic ideals of order, discipline, and leading a virtuous life really clicked with him. It shaped his character. Get this, when he took the oath of office to become the very first president of the United States, the Bible he placed his hand on was borrowed from a local Masonic lodge in New York. I mean, that tells you everything, right? This wasn't just a membership card for him, it was part of his identity.
All right, next up, the one and only Benjamin Franklin. Inventor, writer, diplomat, the guy did it all. And in the Masonic world, he wasn't just another face in the crowd. Oh no, he was a bona fide leader, a major influencer, who used his connections and his status to push the American cause forward, both at home and on the world stage.
So Franklin didn't just join, he rose right to the top. He held the title of Grand Master in Pennsylvania, which is basically the highest leadership position you can get. That put him at the absolute center of this huge web of influential men, and he was brilliant at using it. Especially when he was a diplomat in France, his Masonic connections were his secret weapon, helping him build the support and alliances that were absolutely crucial for America to win the war.
And the list just keeps going. This wasn't just a club for generals and diplomats. The Masonic network reached far and wide, pulling in some of the most iconic names of the era, men whose famous actions really defined the whole fight for independence.
You know John Hancock, right? The guy with the giant, unmistakable signature on the Declaration of Independence? Well, he was a dedicated Mason. And then you've got Paul Revere. We all know the story of his midnight ride. But what you might not know is that he was also a Grand Master up in Massachusetts. You see the pattern here? These weren't just members. They were leaders, weaving this network together all across the colony.
So we've established that a ton of the Founding Fathers were Masons. But the big question is, so what? What does that actually mean? How did the private values these men practiced inside their lodges become the public blueprint for an entire country?
This quote right here really nails it. Think about what a Masonic lodge was. It was a place where they were basically running an experiment in unity. They were taking men from totally different backgrounds, farmers, merchants, soldiers, you name it, and uniting them under a common set of beliefs. It was like a mini version of what the 13 colonies were trying to do on a massive scale. It was a practice run for building a nation. And here is where it gets really cool. You can literally draw a straight line from the core principles being taught in these Masonic lodges to the foundational ideals written into America's most sacred documents, like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Let's start with equality. Inside the four walls of the lodge, it didn't matter if you were a wealthy landowner or a simple blacksmith. You were brothers on the same level. Now, in the 18th century, with its super rigid class system, that was a truly radical idea. And that very idea directly fueled the belief in a republic, a country where power belongs to the people, to the citizens, not to some king an ocean away.
Okay, how about religious tolerance? The Masons had a pretty simple rule. You just had to believe in some kind of supreme being. They didn't care what you called that higher power. This created an atmosphere of respect for different faiths, which was pretty rare at the time. Sound familiar? It should. That principle is the very heart of the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, and the freedom of religion we value so much today. And finally, let's talk about the rule of law. Every single Masonic lodge ran itself based on its own written constitution and a clear set of rules. This taught its members, many of whom would, go on to write the U.S. Constitution, a profound respect for orderly government. It showed them the power of having a written contract that lays out all the rules. That idea became the bedrock of American democracy.
So, yeah, this is all really fascinating history, but why should we care about it now? What's the takeaway from this sort of hidden chapter of America's origin story?
Well, for one, understanding this Masonic connection gives us a way richer, deeper context for how the United States came to be. It shows us that ideals like liberty and equality weren't just pulled out of thin air. They were being practiced and refined in these lodges for years. It helps explain where huge concepts like the separation of church and state really came from. And maybe most importantly in our modern world, knowing the real history helps us cut through all the noise and debunk some of the wild conspiracy theories that are out there.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. How does that happen? How do the private values shared by a small group of people in a brotherhood ripple outward to become the public foundation for an entire nation? It really makes you wonder, what small groups and conversations happening today are quietly shaping the world of tomorrow? Thanks for watching.